The smoke from the stable fire still clung to Hannah Everhart's skin 2 months after it happened. Or at least that was how it felt when she caught her reflection in the cracked mirror above her wash basin. The year was 1877, and the summer heat in Springerville, Arizona Territory, was relentless. But Hannah kept her sleeves rolled down to her wrists and her collar buttoned high despite the perspiration that gathered at her temples. She had learned that covering the twisted, angry red scars that crawled up her left arm and across her shoulder was easier than facing the whispers that followed her through town. She had been 19 when the fire took everything. Her father's stable, the horses he had spent years breeding, and very nearly her life. Now at 21, she worked in the back room of Morrison's general store, taking inventory and unpacking crates where customers would not have to see her. Mrs. Morrison was kind enough, but Hannah understood the unspoken arrangement. The scars that puckered the left side of her neck and disappeared beneath her collar were not good for business. The bell above the shop door rang, and Hannah heard Mrs. Morrison's cheerful greeting fade into the practiced politeness she reserved for strangers. Hannah continued counting tins of coffee, her right hand moving efficiently while her left remained mostly still. The fire had stolen some of the flexibility from those fingers, leaving them slightly curled even at rest. "Looking for work, are you?" Mrs. Morrison's voice carried to the back room. "I am afraid we are fully staffed, but you might try the Silver Bell Ranch about 6 miles north. Heard they lost a couple of hands last week." "Obliged, madam." The voice was deep, polite, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent time in Texas. "Actually hoping to pick up some supplies first. Got a list here." Hannah heard paper rustling and continued her work, trying not to listen but finding it difficult in the small space. Mrs. Morrison would call her if she needed help lifting something heavy. "Oh my, this is quite extensive. Let me see, I have most of this in stock, but some items are in the back." "Hannah, could you come help me, dear?" Hannah set down her pencil and smoothed her skirts, checking that her sleeves were properly fastened. She stepped through the doorway and kept her eyes on Mrs. Morrison, avoiding looking at the customer directly. It was easier that way. "We need 3 coils of rope, the good hemp ones on the top shelf, and those tins of tobacco you were just counting." "Yes, madam." Hannah moved toward the rope first, reaching up with her right hand. The coils were heavy, wound tight and stored high to keep them dry. She stretched, her fingertips just brushing the rough hemp. "Allow me." The stranger stepped closer, and Hannah instinctively turned her left side away, presenting her right shoulder. He was tall, she noticed, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that needed cutting. He pulled down the rope coils with easy strength and set them on the counter. When he stepped back, he smiled at her, a genuine expression that reached his dark eyes. "That shelf is too high. Someone could get hurt." "I manage just fine," Hannah said quietly, moving past him to retrieve the tobacco tins. She could feel his gaze on her, and her skin prickled with familiar anxiety. She gathered the tins quickly and brought them to the counter, setting them down with perhaps more force than necessary. "Anything else?" Mrs. Morrison asked, consulting the list again. The stranger, who still had not introduced himself, studied the items already assembled. "That should start me off. I will be back once I am settled somewhere. How much do I owe you?" While Mrs. Morrison tallied the purchases, Hannah returned to the back room, grateful to escape. She heard the transaction complete, the bell ring, and then silence. She exhaled slowly, willing her heartbeat to calm. It was always like this around strangers, this fear that they would see, that they would stare, that they would ask questions or worse, offer pity. "He seemed nice," Mrs. Morrison said, appearing in the doorway. "Polite. Good manners. Said his name was Jacob Ashford, just arrived from Texas." Hannah made a noncommittal sound and returned to counting coffee tins. "He did not stare, you know," Mrs. Morrison continued gently. "When he looked at you, he just smiled." "Please, Mrs. Morrison." Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I would rather not discuss it." The older woman sighed but respected the boundary, returning to the front of the store. Hannah closed her eyes briefly, pushing away the unexpected flutter she had felt when Jacob Ashford smiled at her. There was no point in such foolishness. Men did not look at damaged women with anything but curiosity or pity, and she had no use for either. The afternoon crawled by in its usual rhythm. Hannah completed the inventory, helped unpack a shipment of dry goods, and swept the back room until the floorboards gleamed. Mrs. Morrison let her leave an hour before closing, a kindness that allowed Hannah to walk home while most people were still indoors avoiding the worst of the heat. The boarding house where she rented a small room sat at the edge of town, run by a widow named Mrs. Carpenter who asked few questions and kept the place clean. Hannah climbed the stairs to the second floor, unlocked her door, and finally allowed herself to unbutton her collar and roll up her sleeves. The scars were worse in the evening light, when the sun slanted through her window and illuminated every ridge and valley of damaged skin. The left side of her neck bore the marks where flames had licked upward, the skin there tighter than it should be, pulling slightly when she turned her head too quickly. Her shoulder and upper arm were a landscape of healed burns, some areas puckered and white, others still faintly pink. The doctors had said she was lucky. Lucky to be alive, lucky to have kept the arm, lucky the scars had not spread to her face beyond a small mark on her jaw that she could mostly hide with careful positioning. Hannah did not feel lucky. She felt marked, branded as something broken and undesirable. In the 2 years since the fire, not a single man had courted her. The few who had shown interest before the accident had found excuses to withdraw their attention after. She had learned to expect nothing and to protect herself by expecting even less. She washed with water from the basin, changed into her nightdress, and sat by the window with her mending. The boarding house was quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant sound of horses from the livery stable down the street. She tried not to think of her father's stable, of the business they had built together, of the night everything burned. But memory was persistent, and sometimes in the quiet moments she could still smell the smoke. 3 days passed before Jacob Ashford returned to the general store. Hannah was arranging bolts of fabric on the shelves in the front room when the bell rang, and she looked up before she could stop herself. He wore the same worn denim trousers and a different shirt, clean but faded from many washings. His hat was in his hands, and he was smiling at Mrs. Morrison with that same genuine warmth that seemed to come naturally to him. "Morning, madam. Got that job at the Silver Bell, so I am here for those other supplies I will be needing." "Wonderful. Congratulations, Mr. Ashford. Let me see that list." Hannah turned back to the fabric, trying to make herself invisible, but her hands trembled slightly as she aligned the bolts. She heard them discussing various items, heard Mrs. Morrison's pleasant chatter about the ranch and the owners, heard Jacob's easy responses. She focused on her task, keeping her scarred side angled away from the room. "Hannah, dear, could you fetch some of those leather gloves from the back? Mr. Ashford needs work gloves." There was no avoiding it. Hannah set down the bolt of calico she had been holding and walked to the back room, acutely aware of Jacob's presence. She found the gloves quickly, selected 3 pairs of different sizes, and brought them out. This time, she kept her eyes down as she set them on the counter. "Thank you kindly, miss." His voice was warm, appreciative. She nodded and started to turn away, but Mrs. Morrison stopped her. "Hannah, Why don't you help Mr. Ashford select some of those provisions while I total up what he has already? He needs flour, cornmeal, beans, things like that. You know where everything is better than I do." It was a transparent attempt at matchmaking, and Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the temperature. But Mrs. Morrison was her employer, so she nodded stiffly and waited for Jacob to indicate what he needed. "I appreciate the help," he said, pulling a paper from his pocket. "I am not much of a cook, but the ranch provides room and board, so this is mainly for coffee and such in the bunkhouse." Hannah took the list from him, careful not to let their fingers touch, and scanned the items. "This way," she said quietly, moving toward the shelves that held dry goods. He followed, and she could feel him behind her, a presence that seemed to take up more space than it should. She pointed to the flour sacks. "How much do you need?" "2 pounds should do." She hefted a 2-pound sack, and he reached to take it from her, but she had already gripped it with her right hand and tucked it against her hip. "I can manage." "I did not mean to suggest you could not." There was no irritation in his voice, just a statement of fact. "You work here. I am sure you lift things all day." She glanced at him, surprised by the observation, and found him looking at the shelves rather than at her. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes, please. 2 tins." They moved through the store like that, Hannah pointing out items and Jacob either carrying them himself or allowing her to do so, never presuming, never pushing. It was strange, this easy courtesy, so different from the way most people treated her, either overly helpful as if she were an invalid or carefully distant as if damage were contagious. When they returned to the counter, Mrs. Morrison had already tallied most of the purchase. Jacob paid in coins that he counted out carefully, clearly a man who tracked his money with care. He thanked them both, tipped his hat to Hannah specifically, and headed for the door. Then he paused, turned back. "I wonder," he said, addressing Hannah directly, "if you might know of a good place to get a decent meal in town. The ranch cook is fine for daily fare, but I heard there might be somewhere that serves a proper Sunday supper." Hannah blinked, caught off guard by the question. "The hotel dining room," she said. "They serve a Sunday roast. It is supposed to be good, though I have never tried it myself." "Maybe you would like to sometime," he said, and the words hung in the air like something fragile and unexpected. "I mean, if you would like company. I do not know many folks here yet." The refusal rose automatically to Hannah's lips, but something in his expression stopped her. He was not looking at her with pity or curiosity. He was simply asking, the way one person might ask another, nothing more complicated than that. "I do not think that would be appropriate," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But thank you for the invitation." He nodded, accepting the rejection with grace. "Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. Good day, Miss Everhart." He knew her name. Of course he did, in a town this small, but hearing him say it made something twist in her chest. She watched him leave, the door closing behind him with a soft click of the bell. "That was a mistake," Mrs. Morrison said once he was gone. "What was?" Turning him down. "That young man is polite, employed, and he looked at you like you were a normal woman instead of a charity case. You should reconsider." "He was being kind," Hannah said, her throat tight. "That is all. Once he gets to know people, someone will tell him about the fire, about the scars, and then he will understand why it is not appropriate." "Hannah Everhart, you are not cursed. You were burned in an accident. That does not make you unworthy of companionship. Please, can we not discuss this?" Hannah's voice broke slightly, and she hated the weakness it revealed. "I have work to finish." Mrs. Morrison sighed but let the matter drop, and Hannah returned to the fabric bolts with hands that shook harder than before. She told herself the trembling was from anxiety, from the stress of the interaction, but part of her knew it was something else entirely. It was the tiny, terrifying spark of hope that Jacob Ashford had inadvertently ignited, and she needed to extinguish it before it grew into something that could hurt her. Sunday came, and Hannah attended the early morning service at the small church on the edge of town. She sat in the back pew, as she always did, and left before the socializing began. She spent the afternoon in her room, reading a book she had borrowed from the tiny lending library, trying not to think about hotel dining rooms or Sunday roasts or dark-eyed cowboys who smiled like they meant it. At 4 o'clock, someone knocked on her door. Hannah set aside her book, confused. Mrs. Carpenter rarely disturbed her boarders, and Hannah had no friends who would visit. She opened the door to find Mrs. Morrison standing in the hallway, dressed in her Sunday best and looking determined. "Get your good dress on," the older woman announced. "We are going to the hotel for supper." "Mrs. Morrison, I do not think. I did not ask what you think. I am hungry, I want proper roast beef, and I need company. You are coming with me." It was impossible to argue with that tone the one Mrs. Morrison used when she had made up her mind about something. Hannah changed into her best dress, a deep blue cotton with long sleeves and a high collar that she had sewn herself, and followed Mrs. Morrison down the stairs and into the early evening heat. The hotel dining room was half full when they arrived, mostly families and a few couples. The proprietor, Mr. Davison, greeted Mrs. Morrison warmly and showed them to a table near the window. Hannah kept her eyes down, focusing on the menu card even though she had already decided to order the cheapest item available. "2 of the Sunday roast, please," Mrs. Morrison told Mr. Davison, "with all the fixings." When he left, Hannah started to protest, but Mrs. Morrison held up her hand. "My treat. Do not even think about arguing." They settled into an awkward silence, Hannah studying the checkered tablecloth while Mrs. Morrison watched the other diners with undisguised interest. The food arrived promptly, and it was indeed good, the beef tender and the vegetables seasoned just right. Hannah ate slowly, trying to enjoy the rare treat while also wishing she were back in her room. "Good evening, Mrs. Morrison. Miss Everhart." Hannah's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She looked up to find Jacob Ashford standing beside their table, hat in hand, looking as surprised to see them as they were to see him. He wore clean trousers and a white shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, and his dark hair was still damp, as if he had just washed. "Mr. Ashford." "What a pleasant surprise," Mrs. Morrison said with entirely too much enthusiasm. "Are you dining alone?" "Yes, madam. Thought I would treat myself after my first week at the Silver Bell." "Then you must join us. We have plenty of room, and it seems silly for you to sit alone when we are right here." "Oh, I would not want to intrude. Nonsense." "Hannah, move your napkin so Mr. Ashford can sit down." Hannah wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole, but instead she moved her napkin and watched as Jacob settled into the chair across from her, looking genuinely pleased. He ordered the roast when Mr. Davison came by, and then Mrs. Morrison launched into a series of questions about the ranch that kept the conversation flowing while Hannah concentrated on her plate. "How are you finding Springerville, Mr. Ashford?" Mrs. Morrison asked. "It is a good town," he said. "Reminds me a bit of home, except the heat is drier here. I am from East Texas originally, near Nacogdoches." "That is quite a journey. What brought you all the way to Arizona Territory?" Jacob's expression shifted, something flickering across his features that might have been pain or regret. "Family trouble mostly. Sometimes a man needs a fresh start." "Indeed. We all need that sometimes, do we not, Hannah?" Hannah shot Mrs. Morrison a look that should have communicated her extreme discomfort, but the older woman either did not notice or chose to ignore it. "I suppose," Hannah murmured. "Miss Everhart, I noticed you at church this morning," Jacob said, addressing her directly. "I was hoping to introduce myself properly after the service, but you left quickly." "I prefer not to linger," Hannah said, still focusing on her food. "She is shy," Mrs. Morrison supplied helpfully, earning another sharp look from Hannah. "Nothing wrong with that," Jacob said easily. "I am not much for crowds myself. Give me open range and a good horse any day over a packed room." "You have your own horse?" Mrs. Morrison asked. "I do. A bay gelding named Rusty. Had him since he was a colt. He made the journey from Texas with me, and I would not trade him for anything." "Hannah's father bred horses," Mrs. Morrison said, and Hannah's fork clattered against her plate. "Before the fire, of course. He had some of the finest stock in the territory." "Mrs. Morrison, please," Hannah whispered, her face burning. "It is nothing to be ashamed of, dear. Your father was a talented horseman, and everyone knew it." Jacob looked between them, clearly sensing the tension but too polite to comment on it. "I would have liked to meet him," he said simply. "A man who knows horses is worth knowing." "He died in the fire," Hannah said flatly, lifting her eyes to meet Jacob's for the first time. 2 years ago. The stable burned, and he went back in to save the horses. He saved 3 before the roof collapsed." The words came out harder than she intended, sharp with the grief she usually kept locked away. Jacob's expression softened with understanding, not pity but genuine sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "That is a hard thing to carry." "Yes." Hannah set down her fork, her appetite gone. "If you will excuse me, I need some air." She stood quickly, before Mrs. Morrison could protest, and made her way through the dining room to the hotel's front porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was finally starting to cool. She gripped the porch railing, willing herself to calm down, to push the memories back into the locked box where they belonged. The door opened behind her, and she knew without looking that it was Jacob. She could sense him now, somehow, the way you could sense a storm coming. "I apologize if my questions upset you," he said, staying back near the door, giving her space. "You did not upset me. Mrs. Morrison did. She means well, but she does not understand that some things are better left alone." "I understand that." He moved closer, but not too close, leaning against the railing a few feet away. "My father drank himself to death 3 years back. People always want to talk about it, like discussing it will somehow make it better, but some pain is private." Hannah glanced at him, surprised by the admission. "I am sorry. Me too." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Your father sounds like he was brave, going back for the horses." "He was foolish," Hannah said bitterly. "He should have let them go, should have thought about his daughter instead of animals. Maybe, or maybe he could not live with himself if he did not try. Some men are built that way, and it got him killed." "Yes, it did. But I bet those 3 horses he saved meant something to someone. And I bet when people remember your father, they remember his courage, not his foolishness." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "They remember the fire. They remember the girl who was stupid enough to run into the stable after him and got burned for her trouble." The words were out before she could stop them, the truth she never spoke aloud. Jacob turned to look at her fully, and she waited for the pity, for the awkward platitudes. Instead, he said, "That was not stupid. That was love." The simplicity of the statement broke something in her, and a tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away angrily, frustrated with herself for showing weakness in front of this stranger who somehow seemed to see too much. "I should go back inside," she said, not moving. "Or you could stay out here a while longer," Jacob suggested. "Let Mrs. Morrison finish her meal in peace, and then you can go home when you are ready. She will worry. I will go tell her you are fine. Be right back." He disappeared inside before she could protest, and Hannah let out a shaky breath. She should leave, should walk back to the boarding house and lock herself in her room where it was safe. But her feet would not move, and when Jacob returned a few minutes later, she was still standing at the railing, watching the sunset. "Mrs. Morrison says to take your time," he reported. "She is having pie." Despite everything, Hannah felt a small smile tug at her lips. She does love her pie. Cannot fault her for that. Jacob resumed his position against the railing, comfortable in the silence. After a while, he said, "How did you get out of the stable after you ran in?" "My father threw me out." Hannah's voice was distant, remembering. "I was trying to open the stall gates and he picked me up and threw me through the door. My sleeve was already on fire. I rolled in the dirt to put it out, and when I looked up, the whole building was engulfed. He never came out." "You tried to go back in." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, some men from town held me back. I fought them. I think I hurt someone. Everything after that is blurry until I woke up at the doctor's house." "How long were you there?" 6 weeks. "The burns got infected. They thought I would lose the arm, but the doctor was stubborn. He tried a new treatment he had read about. It worked, mostly." "May I see?" The question was so unexpected that Hannah turned to stare at him. "What? Your scars? May I see them?" His voice was gentle, curious, but not invasive. "You do not have to if you do not want to, but I would like to understand what you survived." No one had ever asked to see the scars. People either stared when they caught accidental glimpses or carefully avoided looking at all. The request was bizarre, but there was something honest about it that made Hannah hesitate instead of immediately refusing. "Why? Because you are ashamed of them," Jacob said simply, "and I do not think you should be. You have not seen them, true, so show me." Hannah's hands moved to her collar before she could think better of it, fingers trembling as she unbuttoned the top 3 buttons. She turned her head to the left, exposing the twisted skin that climbed her neck. In the fading light, the scars looked darker, more pronounced. She waited for his reaction, for the sharp intake of breath, or the careful mask of neutrality that people wore when they were trying not to show disgust. Instead, Jacob stepped closer and studied the scars with the same attention he might give to a complicated knot or an interesting rock formation. Then, before she could process what was happening, he reached out and gently traced the line where damaged skin met healthy with his fingertip. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Not anymore. Sometimes it pulls when I move quickly." His finger followed the scar up to where it disappeared into her hairline, his touch so light it barely registered. "The doctor did good work. These could have been much worse. They are bad enough." "They are proof you loved your father enough to risk everything," Jacob said, his hand dropping away. "They are proof you are stronger than fire. How could that be bad?" Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "People stare. They whisper. Men look away. Then they are fools." He said it with such conviction that she almost believed him. "May I see your arm?" This was harder. Her neck she could hide or reveal with a few buttons, but her arm required rolling up her sleeve, exposing the worst of the damage. But something about the way he had touched her neck, with such careful respect, made her want to show him. She rolled up her left sleeve, revealing the puckered, twisted skin that covered her forearm and extended up past her elbow. Jacob examined her arm with the same serious attention, his fingers hovering just above the skin. "May I touch it?" she nodded, not trusting her voice. He ran his hand along her forearm, over the ridges and valleys of scar tissue, with a gentleness that made her chest ache. When he reached her hand, he took it in both of his, carefully straightening the fingers that did not fully extend anymore. "Can you make a fist?" she tried, and her fingers curled partially, not quite closing. "Not all the way. The skin is too tight, but you can grip things." "Yes, I manage." "You more than manage." He looked up at her, still holding her hand. You work full days at the store, you carry heavy items, you do not let this stop you. I do not have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You could have given up. Lots of people would have, but you did not. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her scarred knuckles, a kiss so tender and unexpected that Hannah gasped. Then he kissed her wrist and her forearm and the inside of her elbow, each kiss deliberate and gentle. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Kissing away the shame," he said, moving to her shoulder, pressing his lips to the damaged skin there through the thin fabric of her sleeve. "These scars are beautiful. They are proof you survived, proof you are brave and strong and devoted. How could I see them as anything but beautiful?" Tears were streaming down Hannah's face now, and she could not stop them. No one had touched her scars with anything but clinical necessity since they healed. No one had called them beautiful. No one had looked at her the way Jacob was looking at her now, like she was precious instead of damaged. "I do not understand," she managed. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He straightened, still holding her hand. "I know you are kind because you helped me in the store even though it made you uncomfortable. I know you are strong because you survived something that would have broken most people. I know you hide yourself away because you think you are not worthy of being seen, and that is wrong. You are worth seeing, Hannah Everhart, scars and all." "This is not real," she said, shaking her head. "People do not just meet someone and feel this way, do not they?" His thumb traced circles on her scarred palm. "I have met plenty of people, Hannah. Most of them are just faces that pass by. But some people, some rare people, you look at them and you just know. You know they are important. You know they matter. I looked at you in the store that first day and I knew." "Knew what?" "That I wanted to know everything about you, that I wanted to make you smile, that I wanted to take away whatever was making you so sad." He raised her hand to his lips again, kissing her knuckles. "I know it is fast. I know it seems crazy, but I do not believe in wasting time when you find something worth having." Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Every instinct told her to pull away, to protect herself, to not believe in something that felt too good to be real. But his hands were warm around hers, and his eyes were steady and honest, and she was so tired of being afraid. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted. "I have never been courted. Even before the fire, I was too busy helping my father to pay attention to boys, and after, well, there was no point." "There is every point," Jacob said, "and courting is easy. We spend time together, we talk, we learn about each other. We see if this feeling grows or fades. And if people talk, let them talk. I do not care what people think, and you should not either. Easy for you to say. You are not the one who is scarred." His expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Everyone is scarred, Hannah. Some of us just wear our scars on the inside where no one can see them. Yours are visible, which makes you honest. I admire that." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope that this beautiful, impossible thing might be real. "Can we go slowly?" she asked. "I need time to trust this." "As slow as you need," he promised. "I am not going anywhere." Mrs. Morrison appeared in the doorway, looking pleased with herself. "Are you two about finished having your conversation? Because I have eaten my weight in pie and I need to walk it off." Jacob released Hannah's hand reluctantly, and Hannah hurriedly rolled down her sleeve and buttoned her collar, her face burning. But when Mrs. Morrison saw her expression, she simply smiled and patted her arm. "About time," was all she said. Jacob walked them back to the boarding house, keeping up an easy stream of conversation about the ranch and the work he would be doing. At the door, he tipped his hat to Mrs. Morrison and then turned to Hannah. "May I call on you next Sunday, after church, if you are willing to linger a bit?" Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "I would like that." His smile could have lit up the whole territory. "Then I will see you Sunday, Miss Everhart." She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from his kisses, and tried to convince herself this was really happening. Mrs. Morrison squeezed her shoulder. "That is a good man," she said. "Do not let fear talk you out of happiness." "I am trying," Hannah whispered. "I am really trying." The week passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Hannah worked at the store, helped Mrs. Morrison with inventory, and tried not to count the hours until Sunday. Jacob came into the store twice during the week, once for supplies and once apparently just to see her. Each time, he smiled at her like she was the best thing he had seen all day. And each time, she felt a little more of her protective walls crumble. On Friday, he brought her a wildflower, a simple yellow bloom that he had picked on the range. "Thought you might like this," he said, setting it on the counter between them. "It is not much, but it reminded me of sunshine, and you remind me of sunshine." "I am hardly sunshine," Hannah said, but she took the flower carefully, cradling it in her palm. "You are to me," he said simply, and left before she could argue. She pressed the flower between the pages of her Bible that night, preserving it like the precious thing it was. Sunday arrived with clear skies and temperatures that promised another scorching day. Hannah dressed with extra care, choosing her blue dress again because it was her best, and because she thought Jacob might remember it. She attended the service and, for the first time in 2 years, stayed afterward. Jacob found her near the church steps, talking awkwardly with Mrs. Morrison and a few other women from town. He approached with his hat in his hands, looking freshly scrubbed and nervous. "Miss Everhart, I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. It is a fine morning for it." The women from town exchanged glances, and Hannah could practically feel the gossip forming, but she found she did not care as much as she thought she would. "I would like that," she said. They walked together through town, toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge. It was a popular spot for families, and several people were already there, children playing in the shallow water while parents watched from the shade. Jacob led her to a quieter spot upstream, where cottonwood trees provided cover, and the sound of running water created a sense of privacy. "I have been thinking about you all week," he said once they were settled on a fallen log. "Could not hardly concentrate on work." "I have been thinking about you too," Hannah admitted. "It frightens me how much." "Why does it frighten you?" She gestured to her neck, her arm. "Because I know how this ends. You will realize what you have gotten yourself into. You will see me in full sun. Or you will hear the stories about the fire, about how I was screaming and fighting when they pulled me away from the stable. You will understand that I am not just scarred on the outside, and you will change your mind." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. Then he stood and began unbuttoning his shirt. "What are you doing?" Hannah asked, alarmed. He pulled off his shirt, revealing a broad chest and muscled arms, and turned his back to her. A long, jagged scar ran from his right shoulder blade down to his left hip, pale against his tanned skin. "Knife fight when I was 18. Man in a bar took exception to something I said. He got me good before I could stop him." He turned around, showing her a smaller scar on his ribs. "This one is from a bull that did not appreciate being roped, caught me with his horn." He pointed to a pale line on his forearm. "Barbed wire about 5 years ago. Got infected and I nearly lost the arm." He put his shirt back on and sat down beside her again, closer this time. "My point is, everyone carries scars, Hannah. Everyone has things they are ashamed of or afraid of. You are not alone in that. The difference is, your scars tell a story of love and courage. Mine just tell a story of a young fool who drank too much and thought he was invincible." "You were protecting yourself," Hannah said softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I was just stupid. Either way, I am not ashamed anymore. These scars made me who I am. They taught me lessons I needed to learn, same as yours." Hannah traced the scar on his forearm gently, mirroring what he had done to her. "Does it hurt? Not anymore. But it pulls sometimes, like yours. Reminds me to pay attention to what I am doing." "I am still afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid to believe this is real." Jacob took her scarred hand in his, interlacing their fingers. "Then let me believe for both of us until you are ready. I am not going anywhere, Hannah, not unless you tell me to. I do not want you to go anywhere." "Then I will stay." They sat there by the creek until the sun was high overhead, talking about everything and nothing. Jacob told her about growing up in Texas, about his mother who had died when he was young, about his father's decline into drink and the fights that had finally driven Jacob away. Hannah told him about learning to train horses from her father, about the pride she had felt when they sold their first yearling, about the tight-knit partnership she and her father had formed after her mother died of fever when Hannah was 12. "We only had each other," she said. "So when I lost him, I lost everything." "Not everything," Jacob said gently. "You still have yourself, and now if you will have me, you have me too." She looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like something out of a dream, and made a decision. She leaned forward and kissed him, brief and chaste but full of meaning. When she pulled back, he was smiling. "I will take that as a yes," he said. "Yes," she confirmed. "I will have you. I am still afraid, but yes." "Fear is fine," he said. "We will work through it together." They walked back to town hand in hand, and if people stared or whispered, Hannah tried not to notice. Mrs. Morrison was waiting on the boarding house porch with a knowing smile. "Good walk?" she asked innocently. "Very good," Jacob said. "Mrs. Morrison, I would like to formally request permission to court Miss Everhart. I know it is usually the father's permission I would ask, but since he has passed, I thought I should ask the person who looks after her welfare." Mrs. Morrison's eyes softened. "Mr. Ashford, you have my blessing and my encouragement, but it is Hannah's permission you truly need." "You have it," Hannah said quietly. "You already have it." The courting began in earnest after that. Jacob came to town every Sunday after church, and they would walk or sit by the creek, or occasionally have a meal together at the hotel. He started stopping by the store more frequently during the week, always with a good reason, supplies he needed or a question about some item, but really just to see her. Hannah began to look forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. 6 weeks into their courtship, Jacob invited her to visit the Silver Bell Ranch. "I want you to meet Rusty," he said, "and I want to show you the work I do, if you are interested." "I would love to see a working ranch again," Hannah said. The truth was, she missed horses desperately. She had avoided the livery stable in town because it was too painful, but the idea of seeing a ranch, of being around the animals she had once loved so much, called to something deep inside her. The following Saturday, Jacob borrowed a wagon from the ranch and came to collect her. The ride took about 40 minutes, following a rough road through scrubland dotted with mesquite and sage. The Silver Bell was a sprawling operation, with a large main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Jacob drove her straight to the barn where he kept Rusty. The bay gelding was beautiful, well-muscled and glossy, with intelligent eyes and a gentle demeanor. He whickered when he saw Jacob and pushed his nose into the cowboy's hand, looking for treats. "Rusty, meet Miss Hannah," Jacob said. "Hannah, this is the best horse in Arizona Territory, though do not tell the other hands I said that." Hannah approached slowly, holding out her hand for Rusty to sniff. The horse investigated her with velvet lips, then accepted her gentle strokes along his neck. "He is beautiful," she said. "You trained him yourself," from a colt. "My father, before the drinking got bad, taught me how to work with horses. It is the one good thing he gave me." Hannah continued stroking Rusty, feeling something settle in her chest. This was familiar, this language of touch and trust with an animal who did not care about scars. "I miss this," she said quietly. "I miss working with horses more than almost anything." "Then come work with them," Jacob said. "The ranch always needs help and you clearly have the skill." "I could talk to the owner, Mr. Peterson. I do not think anyone would want to hire someone like me. Someone like you. You mean someone with experience and knowledge and a gift for handling animals." Jacob moved to stand beside her, his hand joining hers on Rusty's neck. "Hannah, you cannot let the fire steal everything from you. It took your father and your home and left you scarred, but it does not get to take your future too. You get to decide that." The words hit harder than he probably intended, digging into the place where she had been hiding for 2 years. He was right. She had let the fire define her, had let it turn her into this small, scared version of herself who took inventory in back rooms and avoided living. Her father would have hated what she had become. "I will think about it," she said, which was more than she had been willing to consider before. Jacob showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the other hands and the livestock. The Silver Bell ran both cattle and horses, breeding working stock for other ranches and occasionally breaking wild mustangs brought in from the open range. Mr. Peterson, the owner, was a gruff man in his 60s who looked Hannah over with shrewd eyes when Jacob brought her to the main house. "Jacob says you know horses," he said without preamble. "My father and I bred and trained them," Hannah replied, "before he died. You are John Everhart's daughter. Hell, he was one of the best horsemen I ever met. Bought 2 mares from him back before the fire. Fine animals." He studied her more closely. "You have his look about you. You any good as he was. I learned from him, so I know the basics, but I have not worked with horses in 2 years. Skills like that do not disappear. They just get rusty." He glanced at Jacob. "This your girl?" "Yes, sir," Jacob said without hesitation. "She looking for work, if you are offering it." Mr. Peterson scratched his chin, thinking. "Could use someone who knows horses. Got a mare about to foal, and none of my men have the patience for foaling." "You willing to take night watches if she goes into labor?" Hannah's heart leapt. "Yes, I have attended several births. I know what to watch for." "Then you are hired. Pay is 50 cents a day, more when there is special work like foaling. Room and board included if you want it, or you can work day rates if you prefer to stay in town." "Day rates, please," Hannah said, her mind spinning. This was happening too fast, but it felt right in a way nothing had felt right since the fire. "Report Monday morning, 6 o'clock. We will see what you are made of." As they drove back to town, Hannah could barely contain the mix of excitement and terror coursing through her. "I cannot believe I just agreed to that," she said. "You will be wonderful," Jacob assured her, "and I will be there if you need help. What if I fail? What if I have forgotten everything? Then you will remember, and if you do not, you will learn again." He reached over and took her hand. "Hannah, you are allowed to try new things. You are allowed to fail. You are allowed to succeed. You are allowed to live." Monday morning came too quickly. Hannah rose before dawn, dressed in the oldest skirt she owned, and a work shirt she had borrowed from Mrs. Morrison, and walked the 6 miles to the ranch rather than wait for Jacob to fetch her. She needed to prove to herself she could do this. Mr. Peterson put her to work immediately, showing her the pregnant mare, a sweet-tempered chestnut named Daisy. "She is due any day now," he said. "I want someone checking on her every few hours. During the day, the hands can do it, but nights I want someone who knows what they are looking at." "Think you can handle it?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Jacob will show you the rest of your duties." The work was hard, harder than she had remembered, or maybe she was just softer than she used to be. She mucked stalls, hauled water, measured feed, checked hooves, and did 100 other small tasks that kept a stable running. Her scarred arm ached by noon, the damaged muscles protesting the heavy use, but she pushed through. When Jacob tried to help her with a particularly heavy water bucket, she waved him off. "I need to do this myself," she said. "I need to know I can." He understood and stepped back, though she could feel him watching, ready to intervene if she truly needed help. By the end of the first day, Hannah was exhausted, filthy, and happier than she had been in 2 years. Her body hurt, but it was the good kind of hurt, the kind that came from useful work. Mr. Peterson found her as she was washing up at the pump. "You did good today," he said. "Better than I expected. Be back tomorrow." It was not effusive praise, but it was enough. Hannah walked home through the gathering dusk, her spirit lighter despite her physical fatigue. Mrs. Morrison took one look at her and laughed. "You look like you wrestled a pig and lost," she said. "But you also look happy." "I am," Hannah said, surprised by the truth of it. "I really am." She fell into a routine over the following weeks: work at the ranch during the day, sleep at the boarding house at night, and Sundays with Jacob. The pregnant mare, Daisy, showed signs of impending labor on a Thursday evening, and Hannah stayed at the ranch overnight, dozing in the hay outside the stall. Jacob stayed with her, bringing her coffee and keeping her company during the long, quiet hours. "You do not have to stay," she told him around midnight. "You need to sleep." "I want to be here," he said. "Besides, I have never seen you work with horses. I want to watch." Daisy went into active labor around 3 in the morning. Hannah moved into the stall, speaking softly to the mare, helping guide the process when needed, but mostly just being present. The foal was born healthy and strong, a dark bay colt who struggled to his feet within 20 minutes of birth. Hannah checked him over thoroughly, making sure everything was as it should be, then stepped back to let mother and baby bond. When she emerged from the stall, Jacob was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What?" she asked. "You are magnificent," he said simply. "Watching you work, seeing you so confident and skilled, it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." She looked down at herself, covered in sweat and worse, her hair falling out of its pins. "I am a mess. You are perfect." He pulled her into his arms, not caring about the mess, and kissed her properly for the first time. Not the chaste pecks they had exchanged before, but a real kiss, deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, Hannah was breathless. "Jacob Ashford, I am covered in things I am not going to mention." "I do not care." He kissed her again, softer this time. "I love you, Hannah Everhart. I have loved you since the moment you tried to get those rope coils down by yourself in the store. And I am going to marry you if you will have me." "That is not a proper proposal," Hannah said, but her heart was soaring. "I will do a proper one later with a ring and maybe some flowers. But right now, in this moment, I need you to know that I love you and I want to spend my life with you. So tell me, is there any chance you might feel the same way?" "Yes," Hannah whispered. "Yes, I love you too. I am still afraid sometimes, but I love you." "Then that is enough for now. We will work on the fear together." Mr. Peterson found them like that, wrapped in each other's arms in the pre-dawn light, and cleared his throat loudly. "The foal healthy?" Hannah jumped back, her face flaming. "Yes, sir. A strong colt. No complications." "Good. Then get yourselves cleaned up and try to look professional. This is a ranch, not a courting parlor." But he was smiling as he said it, and when Hannah passed him on her way to the pump, he murmured, "About time that boy found someone worth settling for. You are good for him." The formal proposal came 2 weeks later. Jacob borrowed Mr. Peterson's wagon again and drove Hannah out to a meadow he had found, filled with wildflowers and sheltered by cottonwoods. He had packed a picnic, simple fare but thoughtfully chosen, and they ate while watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. When the sky turned orange and pink, Jacob got down on one knee and pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "Hannah Everhart, I know we have not known each other long by most people's standards. But I know my heart, and I know my mind, and I know I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" Hannah looked at him, this good man who had seen her scars and called them beautiful, who had helped her find her way back to the work she loved, who looked at her like she was precious. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her down into his arms, kissing her until she forgot to be afraid, forgot to be ashamed, forgot everything except the feeling of being loved. They married 6 weeks later, in the small church in Springerville with Mrs. Morrison and the hands from the ranch in attendance. Mr. Peterson gave Hannah away, gruff but clearly pleased, and Jacob cried when he saw her in the simple white dress she had sewn for the occasion. She wore her hair up, displaying her scars proudly, and when anyone stared, Jacob would take her scarred hand and kiss it, making his position clear. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed her with enough enthusiasm to make the audience laugh and cheer. Hannah felt light enough to float away. They had decided to stay at the ranch, at least for now. Mr. Peterson had offered them a small cabin on the property, newly built and clean, and both of them wanted to continue the work they were doing. On their wedding night, Jacob carried Hannah over the threshold and set her down gently in the main room. "I know this is not fancy," he said, gesturing to the simple furnishings, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Hannah said and meant it. He was gentle with her that night, patient and loving, taking his time to learn what made her sigh, what made her gasp. When he undressed her and saw the full extent of her scars for the first time, he kissed every inch of damaged skin, murmuring how beautiful she was, how strong, how perfect. Hannah cried, but they were good tears, healing tears, the tears of someone finally believing they deserved to be loved. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Learning to live together, to navigate each other's moods and habits, required patience and compromise. Hannah's nightmares about the fire, which had faded somewhat, returned periodically, and Jacob learned to wake her gently, to hold her while she cried, to remind her she was safe. Jacob's own demons, the memories of his father and the guilt he carried about leaving, sometimes made him withdraw, and Hannah learned to draw him out with patience and love. But the good far outweighed the difficult. They worked side by side at the ranch, Jacob with the cattle and Hannah increasingly taking over the horse breeding program. Mr. Peterson recognized her skill and gave her more responsibility, and within a year, the Silver Bells horses were in high demand. Hannah's confidence grew with each successful training, each healthy foal, each horse sold to a satisfied buyer. 2 years into their marriage, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Jacob while they were working in the barn, unable to wait for a more romantic moment. He dropped the bridle he was holding and picked her up, spinning her around despite her protests. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We are having a baby." Their son was born on a cold December morning in 1880 after a long but uncomplicated labor. Hannah held the tiny, perfect baby and counted his fingers and toes, overwhelmed by the reality of him. Jacob sat beside the bed, tears streaming down his face, and touched the baby's dark hair with a trembling hand. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. "What about John, after your father?" The suggestion made Hannah's throat tight. "John Ashford. I like that." Little John was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to inherit his mother's love of animals and his father's easy temperament. As he grew into a toddler, he could often be found in the barn. helping with the horses under Hannah's watchful eye. Jacob was a devoted father, patient and playful, and watching him with their son made Hannah fall in love with him all over again. 3 years after John's birth, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with her father's dark eyes and her mother's determined chin. They named her Grace because she was just that, a grace note in their already blessed life. Grace was more cautious than her brother, preferring to observe before diving in, but she had a quiet strength that reminded Hannah of herself. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, of seasons changing and children growing. Mr. Peterson, who had no children of his own, became increasingly reliant on Jacob and Hannah, and when he died peacefully in his sleep in 1887, he left the Silver Bell Ranch to them in his will. The responsibility was enormous, but they rose to meet it, working together to keep the ranch profitable and to honor Mr. Peterson's legacy. Hannah's scars faded somewhat over the years, the angry red softening to white, but they never disappeared. She no longer tried to hide them. When John, at age 5, asked about the marks on her arm, she told him the truth, about his grandfather's bravery and the fire and how she had been hurt trying to help. "Do they hurt?" he asked, touching the scarred skin gently. "Not anymore," Hannah said. "Now they just remind me that I am strong." "Papa says they are beautiful," John reported. "He told me beauty is not about being perfect, it is about being real." Hannah found Jacob later and kissed him thoroughly. "You are teaching our son well." "Just telling him the truth," Jacob said, pulling her close. "You are beautiful, scars and all. Actually, especially with the scars. They make you who you are." In 1890, they built a proper house on the ranch, large enough for their growing family and the life they were building. Hannah designed a library where she could keep records of the breeding program and the books she had started collecting. Jacob built a workshop where he could repair tack and equipment. They created separate rooms for John and Grace, though the children often ended up sleeping together anyway, preferring each other's company. Hannah's breeding program continued to flourish. She developed a reputation throughout Arizona Territory for producing reliable, even-tempered horses with good conformation. Buyers came from as far as California and Texas to purchase Silver Bell stock, and Hannah took pride in personally assessing each potential buyer to ensure her horses would go to good homes. On their 10th anniversary, Jacob surprised Hannah with a trip back to the meadow where he had proposed. They left the children with Mrs. Morrison, who had become an honorary grandmother and doted on John and Grace shamelessly, and spent 2 days camping under the stars. "You ever regret it?" Jacob asked one night as they lay side by side, watching the sky. "Marrying me, taking on the ranch, all of it? Never," Hannah said without hesitation. "You gave me my life back. You helped me remember who I was supposed to be." "You did that yourself," Jacob corrected. "I just reminded you it was possible. We did it together," Hannah compromised. Like everything else. By 1895, John was 15 and already showing skill with horses that rivaled his mother's. Grace, at 12, was more interested in the business side of the ranch, keeping meticulous records and demonstrating a head for numbers that impressed everyone. Hannah and Jacob talked sometimes about what would happen when the children were grown, whether they would want to stay and run the ranch or forge their own paths. "Whatever they choose, we will support them," Jacob said. "Same as we support each other." Hannah's nightmares about the fire had become rare, though they never fully disappeared. But when they came, Jacob was always there holding her, reminding her she was safe, that the past could not hurt her anymore. And when Jacob wrestled with his own demons, the guilt and pain from his childhood, Hannah returned the favor, being his anchor and his safe harbor. In 1898, Mrs. Morrison died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. Hannah grieved the woman who had been her employer, her champion, and her friend. At the funeral, she told the assembled mourners about how Mrs. Morrison had pushed her to accept Jacob's invitation, how she had orchestrated their first dinner together, how she had refused to let Hannah hide from life. "She saw what I could not see," Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. "That I deserved happiness, that my scars did not define me. She was the first person, besides Jacob, who made me believe I could have a full life. I will be forever grateful to her." Jacob squeezed her hand, and she felt the familiar comfort of his presence. 21 years of marriage had not dimmed the love between them. If anything, it had grown deeper, more complex, seasoned by shared joys and sorrows. John married in 1900 to a sweet-natured girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. They held the wedding at the Silver Bell, and Hannah cried through the entire ceremony, though she could not have said if the tears were from happiness or the passage of time or both. Jacob, standing beside her, was not ashamed to cry either. "Our baby is all grown up," he whispered. "We did well with him," Hannah whispered back. "Look how happy he is." Grace showed no interest in marrying young, preferring to focus on expanding the ranch's business. At 18, she was already negotiating contracts and managing the accounts with a skill that would have made Mr. Peterson proud. She had inherited her mother's determination and her father's charm, and the combination made her formidable. In 1905, John and Sarah presented Hannah and Jacob with their first grandchild, a sturdy boy they named Jacob, after his grandfather. Hannah held the baby and marveled at the continuation of their story, this new life that carried their blood and their legacy. Jacob Sr., now 50 years old, had developed some arthritis in his hands but still worked the ranch every day. Hannah, at 47, found herself slowing down somewhat, though she refused to admit it. They hired more help to manage the day-to-day operations, allowing themselves more time to simply be together. One evening, sitting on the porch of their house and watching the sunset, Jacob took Hannah's scarred hand in his weathered one. "You know what I think about sometimes," he said. "What?" "That first day in the store, when I saw you trying to get those rope coils down. I remember thinking you were the most interesting woman I had ever seen. There was something about the way you held yourself, like you were carrying something heavy but refusing to bend under the weight. I wanted to know your story. And now you know all of it," Hannah said. "Every ugly, painful detail." "Nothing about you is ugly," Jacob said firmly, even after all these years still defending her from her own self-criticism. "Your story is beautiful because it is yours, because you survived it, because you let me be part of it." Hannah lifted their joined hands, studying the way her scarred fingers interlaced with his work-roughened ones. "I was so ashamed," she said quietly. "For so long I thought the scars made me unlovable, unworthy of a normal life. I cannot imagine what would have happened if you had not been so stubborn." "Good thing I am stubborn then," Jacob said, grinning. "Had to be to get past all those walls you built. You did not just get past them, you tore them down completely." "We tore them down together," he corrected, echoing words she had said years before. "I showed you it was safe to try, but you did the actual work of healing. You were so brave, Hannah. You are still brave." A second grandchild arrived in 1907, then a third in 1909. Grace finally married in 1910 to a lawyer from Tucson who appreciated her sharp mind and independent spirit. They settled in town but visited the ranch frequently, and Grace continued to manage much of the business from her new home. The years continued their steady march. Hannah and Jacob grew older, their hair graying, their movements slower, but their love remained constant. They had built something together, not just the ranch but a family, a legacy, a life that mattered. In 1915, they celebrated their 37th anniversary with a party that included their children, grandchildren, ranch hands, and friends from throughout the territory, which had become the state of Arizona 3 years earlier. Hannah looked around at the gathering, at the life they had created, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Jacob found her standing alone for a moment, taking it all in. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," she said. "That despite everything that happened, despite the fire and the pain and the scars, my life turned out better than I ever dreamed possible." "My life too," Jacob said. "You made me better, Hannah. You made me want to be better. We made each other better." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, comfortable in the embrace of the man who had loved her when she could not love herself, who had seen beauty in her scars, who had given her everything. As the sun set over the Silver Bell Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fire that had stolen so much had also, in its way, given her everything. It had brought her to her lowest point, yes, but from that low point she had found the strength to rise. And when Jacob Ashford had walked into Morrison's general store that summer day in 1877, he had offered her his hand and helped her climb the rest of the way back to life. The scars remained, faded now to white lines on aging skin, but they no longer carried shame. They were simply part of her story, proof of her survival, markers of the night that had changed everything. Jacob still kissed them sometimes, those scars he had called beautiful all those years ago, and each kiss was a reminder that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Their children and grandchildren played in the yard, the ranch hands joked and told stories, and Hannah and Jacob stood together, partners in every sense of the word, watching the life they had built continue to grow and flourish. "I love you," Hannah whispered. "I love you too," Jacob replied, kissing her temple. "Always have, always will." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every triumph. The Wild West had demanded much from them, but they had faced it together, and together they had created something beautiful. The story of the woman who was ashamed of her scars and the cowboy who kissed each one and called them beautiful was not a fairy tale. It was real, messy, complicated, and absolutely true. And like all the best love stories, it was a testament to the power of seeing someone, truly seeing them, and choosing to love what you see. Hannah Everhart and Jacob Ashford lived the rest of their long lives on the Silver Bell Ranch, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. When Hannah died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, Jacob held her hand and thanked her for every moment they had shared. He followed her 3 months later, unable to imagine a life without the woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under cottonwood trees that whispered in the wind. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued the work they had started, breeding fine horses and raising good families, passing down the story of how their grandparents had found each other against all odds. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, people swore they could see two figures standing on the hill near the graves, hand in scarred hand, watching over the land they had loved and the family they had created. Whether it was imagination or something more, no one could say. But everyone agreed that if any love was strong enough to transcend death, it was the love of Hannah and Jacob Ashford, the woman with scars and the cowboy who called them beautiful. Their story became legend in Springerville, told and retold, a reminder that love sees not with the eyes but with the heart, And that true beauty lies not in perfection but in survival, courage, and the willingness to let someone see you as you truly are. It was a story of healing and hope, of second chances and chosen family, of building something lasting in the harsh but beautiful landscape of the Arizona Territory. And it all began with a simple act of kindness. A cowboy looking at a scarred woman and seeing not damage but beauty, not weakness but strength, not someone broken but someone whole. That moment of seeing, truly seeing, had changed two lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. The Silver Bell Ranch still stands today, run by the descendants of Hannah and Jacob Ashford, a testament to what two people can build when they refuse to let fear win, when they choose love over shame, when they see the beauty in scars.